You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei.
Hello and welcome to the Techie Leadership Show. Today with me I have Philippe de Ryck. He helps developers protect companies through better web security. As the founder of Pragmatic Web Security, he travels the world to train developers on web security and security engineering. His PhD in web security from KU Leuven lies at the basis of his exceptional knowledge of the security landscape. Philippe is a Google developer expert and an Auth0 ambassador expert for his community contribution on security of web applications and APIs. Hello, Philippe. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Same here, and welcome to the show. Do you want to add anything about yourself?
Well, you gave a pretty thorough introduction. So just let me say I'm Philippe from Belgium. I'm excited to be on the show, and whenever you have questions about security, I'm hopefully going to be the one answering them. So if you want to talk about leadership and security combined, be my guest.
Awesome. That sounds really good. And I cannot wait to hear about your stories. And if they have also some securities inside of them. The success one, okay. Security success, okay. But some security failure, leadership failure stories, that would be really interesting. I don't know.
Yes.
I am excited.
Document number one, people usually ask me to sign as an NDA. So I'm not sure how many stories I will be able to tell you, but
rumors inside the community.
Rumors, public stories. Sure, of course.
Okay. And with that in mind, let's get it rolling. What would be the biggest leadership success story you've witnessed personally?
It's interesting to see. Well, from my perspective, it's very interesting to see how companies deal with security. And typically in like a smaller company, it's going to be very straightforward. You have like one or two people responsible for these things, and it's not that complicated to manage all of that. But in the larger companies, some of my customers are the really big companies that are running a lot of different services, and there you have all kinds of teams and all kinds of structures and things going on. And what I notice is that when I'm talking to a group of developers on helping them how to make more secure applications, what really helps is if they know they have the support of management. So often you'll find that they just have to follow training, because depending on how you structure your programs, you have like a checkbox that says you need to have developer training at least this many hours a year. And sometimes I'm doing a checkbox training, which is basically they have to tick the box. So it's like, yeah, whatever, come talk about security. But the best trainings, the most useful trainings to me are the ones where management, well, typically the boss or one of the VPs comes to the training. At the start, they explain why I'm there, what they want people to get out of it, why they shouldn't worry about work for those 2 days. And sometimes even those people join the training as well, which is a very important signal, I think, to the people in the training. Like, we take this seriously and we want you to learn as much as you can from this experience. And it's not just wasting your time for 2 days and getting more work after that. No, it's something we take seriously and we want to invest in.
Yeah. And without naming names, can you give like an example where a boss or a VP from a company was at the training and how he helped impact and make it better for the developers to absorb all this knowledge and take it really serious and actually say like, this company is focused on security and it's important to us, so you better learn from this.
Yeah. Well, I can give you a few examples of things that are definitely very useful in such a setting. So one example is for example, when they ask me if they can pitch in during the training. So I'm teaching a subject, and typically when I'm done, we wrap it up, and then sometimes there's one of the senior people there. They want to pitch in, like, this is how this applies to us specifically. Like, hey, Philippe talked about doing this and this and this. And we have these internal resources available. If you have questions, you should go to these and these people, because these are our internal experts that will be able to help you further on deploying this. And that's definitely one of the good ways to impact this, because it makes, I'm obviously not familiar with every internal aspect of a company.
Yes.
And that makes it twice as relevant for the people in the training. That's one concrete example. And another one is where, for example, people from the company pitch in to discuss cases they had internally. So when I'm talking about a vulnerability, I'm typically using public examples, because obviously I can't use internal
Yes.
examples, but it's like, hey, here's a news story about what happened, and this is what happened there. And what really helps is if people from the company, from the security team, for example, are there and they pitch in saying like, oh yeah, we had this exact problem in our application as well, and we fixed it, this and this, and that was the impact that we had, and so on. So it's all about making this from a more abstract security story, like here are some guidelines to this is what this means concretely for us, and we want you to invest in this. And it's that combination that makes my message stronger. But unfortunately, you need someone from the company, or unfortunately, it's best if someone from the company does that than if I do that, because it hits much harder if it's someone they know and respect and know that is familiar with the internal workings.
Yeah, Philippe, and I think like this applies to any trainings or anything that you take somebody from the outside of the company to do a training, a workshop, consulting, and if you actually have somebody higher up coming there and says like, we're focused on this, participates during, takes his time to participate and also provide his input, say like this, I think will be important for us, and give concrete examples. And also the people participating, if you have like the discussion with them and try to engage them, to have them say like, okay, we got this knowledge, this is how we could apply it in our case, concrete case, and that makes for a better learning environment. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I always appreciate if the training is well supported by the company and actually fits within a larger program of improving security altogether, because there's a lot more than training only, of course.
Yeah, it is. And it's a lot of work, security, especially nowadays. Do you find it's becoming harder and harder to provide like basic levels, not necessarily like basic, but good levels of security, or is it becoming easier and easier?
That's a very, very good question for which I don't have a very good answer. So it all depends on the case. It depends on how you look at things. If you look at security as a whole, I think it's getting harder because there's a lot more software, a lot more devices, and not enough knowledge about security. On the other hand, if you look at specific companies and what they're doing with enterprise development, I think things are getting better because we are learning how to simplify things. We are learning how to automate things. We have a lot of frameworks that offer security out of the box nowadays, which makes my job, instead of teaching a developer how to do every little step themselves, I can now teach them the concept and then tell them like, this, what we talked about, this defense, this framework already does that for you. So all you need to do is follow these guidelines and you're protected. And it's going from, this is all the different things you have to do, to this is what you have to know. And if you stay on this path, then you are covered. And hopefully that will be a continuing evolution, because that's definitely the right way to move forward.
And from your point of view, how important is like for management to be security conscious? Because you said like developers, they need the support of management, but from what you're seeing in the industry, are managers open to the discussion, or are they aware of the implications, and are they willing to pitch in?
Usually they are aware, but I'm biased, because the moment they bring in an external trainer, they already have a budget for security training and all of that. So
Yes.
those are the companies that already know that they have to take this kind of seriously. But even then, I'll find I encounter quite a few people that want to learn about security, but they don't get the buy-in from management. And that means that if they want to build something more secure, and it's going to take a bit more time to add security or to figure out how to do it right, that they don't get that time, and they have to spend their own time if they want to do that. And that creates a very difficult situation. And that's usually not the most effective way to build a security program. You need that buy-in is crucial. If you don't have the buy-in, there's no budget, there's no time, there's always pressure on new features and what business needs and not what security needs. So
Yes.
I would say buy-in from management is absolutely critical. Without that, it's something you can never win.
And on that note, Philippe, without naming names, what is the biggest leadership failure you've had the unfortunate experience of witnessing?
I had to think about that one. So I want to say two things there. So one more general case is what I mentioned before, like the checkbox training, where they have to tick the box for the year and they just bring me in to do a training. I've had cases where the training happens at a hotel because they don't have a meeting room available to fit 20 or 30 people, and that there's nobody from the company there except the attendees and me. So I'm basically doing the introduction myself. The attendees, they have like no good idea. Well, they know they need to be there, but they don't know what's expected of them. Things like that. That's not a very nice way to start a training. We can always make it useful, but they will go away with a bitter feeling anyway. Like, why did we need to be here, not doing other work if there's nobody else supporting us? And one more extreme case there was a training booked for, I think, 40 to 50 people from different departments. And the day before the training, they heard, or a lot of departments were forbidden to go to the training because they had too much work to do. So
what?
Yeah, that was a very, very mixed message there. So top management was like, yeah, we do this training because this is important for us. And then the department level management was like, yeah, no, let's not. So
just crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of internal politics playing at that moment. But as a trainer, it's definitely not fun when you prepared a training for 50 people and there's going to be 15. That's not how things are supposed to go. So that's to me that hurts, because you can see that this is the completely wrong signal for a company, and it's sad that it has to happen that way. But of course, you don't know all the things that are playing anyway as an external trainer. But it's life, I guess.
And I understand, Philippe. If I was you, like in that situation, like you come in and nobody presents you, basically management shows that by not being there, not investing sometimes, it says like this training isn't worth their time. So the people that are there are feeling mostly forced to be there, and say like, if it's not worth their time, why should it be worth my time to be here? And I'm already like, I have so much work to deliver, and they're going to ask me like, is it going to be on time? So I say like, I had to go to the training. And it creates this environment where the people there, they don't really want to be there, so they're not that open to inquiring and getting all the information they should and get some new skills. And also, you as a trainer, if I'd be in your shoes, I would be like, they don't care. Why should I care if they get everything from this training? So it's not good for anybody involved.
As a trainer, I always try to deliver what I'm hired to deliver, because
of course,
even if the people are forced to be there, they still usually, I've only rarely encountered people that don't want to learn. So they're like, yes, we want to learn about this stuff, but if the training is just forced on them, then they know whatever they learned, they're probably not going to be able to apply that as they want anyway, because there's no time and no budget and no desire to do that internally. And that's often very frustrating for those people as well. But if they learn the security principles and they move on to a different job or a different role, then hopefully they can make some change with that, and they can build more secure applications. But yeah.
You see, Philippe, that's why you need to get trainers that are passionate about what they're training about, like yourself, about security, because then they're going to work hard to surpass blockages like this and still make it work somewhere. But that you need people with passion to come and inject some of that passion inside the company from time to time. Especially when you have companies that are just tick box trainings.
Yeah. The good companies, they organize a bunch of trainings. So one of my biggest customers, they just used to fly me all over the world to their different offices to have like a set of classes. So they definitely took security seriously, and they pushed all the teams to invest in security, and they provided everything that they needed. So they're like, oh yeah, you'll have a basic course and an advanced course. Philippe will be there for 4 days, and I will teach you, and people can subscribe to that, and it's always a big hit.
And Philippe, from your point of view, what could a leader or a manager could do to ensure that when developing, like getting people onto trainings, to maximize the effects of the trainings?
I would say that a strong aspect of training is the follow-up. So the training is one thing. I can teach a 2-day class, but if you just sit there in class, it's going to be interesting. But a week later, you're already going to have forgotten a bit of it. And if nothing happens with that knowledge, that the new skill set, then a month later, 2 months later, things are going to go back to where they were before. You might have a bit more knowledge, a bit more information, but in the end, if nothing ever changes, then what good does it do? So what I always try to advise people is that they try to get some takeaways from training. So I give a lot of practical guidelines like, hey, this is a good way to do things. This is a bad way to do things. And what I would like to see, and what I advise people often to do, is to take that into concrete guidelines that you can do or apply to your teams and require your people to follow. Like, hey, we learned that this is the right way of doing things, that this is the wrong way. So let's scan or go back to our applications that we built before and look for that bad pattern and replace it with the good pattern. And that definitely requires some investment afterwards as well. It's not just the 2 days of training, it's the weeks and the months after that to turn what you learned into something actionable that you can do on a daily basis. And that's essentially how you move things forward.
And that's a great tip. And it's something that I was always looking when I was looking for training of any sort. Does it have a sort of follow-up? It's not just an event. Is it like has some plans for the weeks following up the event, for the months? Do the trainers look like, hey, they came in, okay, they did the 2 days, like the bulk of it, but then are they going to come in from check on the people and remind them of the stuff that went up on the trainings and see if they're progressing or not, what's stopping them, make new recommendations to the business, to management, like, hey, we feel that you already invested this amount, if we do like another half a day, I think you'll get like even better results out of it. So having this sort of communication and evaluation afterwards it's not like a one stop, like, okay, we did it, check it off, now they know this forever, because it's not realistic and it doesn't really work. Reinforcement learning is better.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second time you hear about a topic, you'll have a better basis and you'll be able to identify other nuances and things like that. So yeah, it's even I learn new things about the stuff I'm supposed to know about. I know a lot about it, but if you hear someone else's vision on that and maybe some tiny detail like, oh yeah, that's another way of doing that same attack, that's always useful. Yeah.
Same here.
Always
and
learning.
Philippe, yes, it's something that, especially as a developer, you should be used to the concept, but it's hard when you realize, like, oh my god, I never be done. I could retire and I would still need to learn new stuff. And Philippe, based on all your experience, what is your leadership philosophy?
Well, it's a bit difficult to pinpoint that because it's hard. I don't know if, well, people call me sometimes a leader in security, but it's hard to see that myself because I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I guess. I'm just doing my job.
Okay.
And trying to provide people with knowledge and people pick it up and start applying that, or learning and asking for further resources and stuff like that. But I guess one of the important things that I would say is try to lead by example. So instead of just trying to tell other people what they should be doing, I just try to do that myself. So when I believe that there's a gap in knowledge, like this is something everybody should know about, I try to provide some resources that actually fill in that gap without necessarily trying to convince other people to make that or things like that. So I just, when I see something that can be addressed and it fits within my global strategy of where I want to go, then I just pick it up and do it. And if somebody else wants to cooperate on that, that's great. And otherwise, I'll just get it done anyway. And hopefully then will inspire people to do more and provide additional resources.
That sounds really great. And now I really have to ask you, because you said like lead by example. How secure are your own systems? Or are you like the cobbler kids that have no shoes?
I'm a very strong believer in eating my own dog food. So if I tell people how to do something, then I'm usually going to try that myself to follow the same guidelines. In general, I would say I'm pretty security aware. I try to do as much as I can, but of course, security is an ongoing process. It's not like not a goal you reach. Like, yes, I'm finally here, 100%, and it's gonna stay that way. No, it's always a matter of staying on top of things and trying to have the right processes and things like that. So.
And what would be like your top tips to stay safe in this digital age?
That's something that's a very difficult question. It depends entirely on our target audience. If it's for normal people at home, I would strongly suggest to look into some password management techniques where you don't use the same password everywhere. If it's for more tech savvy people or advanced people with advanced skills, I would strongly recommend multi-factor authentication and all of those things. And if it's for developers, then it's going to be secure coding guidelines, things you should absolutely avoid. And always try to think about what can go wrong with things as well. So yeah, the field is very broad there, and it's very hard to give very concrete advice without targeting one specific audience. But yeah.
And since you mentioned like developers should make sure they use like good practices, how can developers help to get more management buy-in on using better practice, security practice, but not just security practice, because better coding practices, development practices, they all take time and they all slow projects down, and you always need to get management buy-in. So if you have some tips or tricks on how to help that smooth that out, it would be really awesome.
Yeah, for security specifically, I always recommend people to talk about the potential impact of problems. So security is one of these tricky things, because if you spend a lot of money on security and you actually get it right, nothing ever happens because things are secure. Yes. So the return is very unclear. It's like, yes, we had 0 incidents this year. Awesome, give us more money. It's not.
Yes, hard to justify.
But what I always recommend, and I always point it out in my when I use an example as well, is like, what is the impact of this? And if you tell a manager the technical details, like, oh, if this happens there, then we have an injection problem and it can be bad. That's a very technical explanation. But if you explain it like, hey, this search feature that everyone can access gives, if this happens, then the attacker has full access to every single record in our database. That makes the impact a bit more concrete. And if you can link that to an example of British Airways, they lost a bunch of credit card information through a bad piece of JavaScript, and they are facing a multi-million-dollar fine for that. And that is something that starts to make that return on investment more clear. Like, if this happens to us and that is the cost, then why not spend a little bit now to make sure we get things right instead of risking that big fine? And even then, it's going to be making the assessment whether you want to risk a potential security issue or you want to protect that. And it depends on the sensitivity and the impact and so on and so on.
And you find like giving concrete examples of potential risk and costs to management really helps like smooth and gets to a faster decision.
Yes, because it makes things very tangible. If you give an example like, hey, here's an application that got breached and it cost them this much in cleanup, it cost them this much in fines and this, then things become real. Because if you just tell them like, yes, somebody can grab the data, it's like, yeah, okay, is it really that bad? What can happen with that? And if you translate that in like, this is what happened to this company, maybe it's a competitor, maybe it's something comparable, but that makes it very real. Like, oh, this is not a made up story. This happened to someone, and this is actually the real life impact.
Yeah. And that's why, as a developer or somebody working in tech, you should have like an arsenal of stories to support your points for what you want to do, especially if you're a professional and you really want management to support you. So it's not just about security, which is Philippe's specialty, but it's also if you want to have like good coding practices and all the stuff you dream as a developer or somebody working in tech, is you need to have stories, horror stories from other companies that led to project failures, so you can use them to explain your points of view to management, and that way you can get them on your side, which is a really good tip.
Yeah,
I wish I had this before some time ago.
It works in both ways. Yeah. So you mentioned horror stories, but it also works for the good stories. So sometimes you'll
Yes,
find a
also.
company, for example, Google is pretty open in these things on what security technologies they apply. And they also show like, hey, we had 9 very high sensitive vulnerabilities, and this technology stopped 7 of them. And information like that can also help smaller companies like, hey, Google is doing this and it's working, and here are the numbers, because that gives it credibility. It's not just something
Yes.
that you read somewhere online. No, it's something that a leader is doing, and they're doing it right, and they're investing in this, which means that it must probably be valuable as well.
That's an awesome point. I love it. And for aspiring leaders, what will be your top 3 leadership tips you have for them?
Speaking from personal experience, I strongly believe in 3 things here. First of all, no job is too dirty, I would say. So
Okay.
whenever something needs to get done, I'll just, well, when I'm the person that needs to do it, or when nobody else is available to do it, I'll just do it myself. And I think that that's really important. The same thing goes for a company. A manager should be present in the training. They're often like, yeah, but I'm not technical. So what? Just join us, and you might
Yes.
not know everything. You might not be the smartest or the most the person with the most knowledge in that room, but it's good to show that to your people as well, because you're gonna have to rely on them, and it's good to
Yes.
show that yourself. And whenever something needs done, just get it done, I would say.
And it's good. It's a good idea to also have an idea about what they learned there, so you can have discussions afterwards.
Absolutely. I also think second point would be to strive for excellence. So I always try to do a good job in everything I do, and because it definitely helps inspire other people. If you do sloppy work yourself, then you can't really expect from other people for them to deliver their best work. So always try to get the best out of your own work and out of other people as well. And it's something that reinforces each other, and that's definitely a good way forward as well. And then finally,
Yes.
transparency. So I strongly believe in transparency. Not necessarily every little detail. Well, not everybody should know every little detail, but they should know at least the big picture, the roadmap. And whenever there's a problem or something that's bothering you, just talk about it. Because if you let things simmer under the surface and until it explodes, then that's no good. So I always try to be transparent. Also, when people ask me and I don't know, I'll tell them like, I don't know. I'll have to look it up. And sometimes in a training, we actually look it up together, and we build an example together to see what the effect is, because some corner cases I also don't know about them, and I'll have to look it up.
Yes.
But yeah.
And I love it that you brought up transparency, because
Yeah,
it's
especially in security, it's a big thing.
yes.
So.
That's why. That's what I want to ask you. Like, especially in security, how do you decide what to be transparent? How do you choose what to let out and what to protect a little? Because it's. I'm curious if you have some guidelines or some tips on these lines on how to choose. How do you choose the level of transparency that it's appropriate by situation by situation?
Well, first of all, security should never rely on obscurity or secrecy. So if you're, well, of course,
Interesting.
password should be secret. But if you
Yes.
if you design an application and it's only secure if nobody knows how it works, then it's not a good design. You should always assume that somebody knows how it works, and that even with that knowledge, they might have an easier time to exploit a problem, but they shouldn't be able to get in automatically. It's not like, oh, if you know this secret URL and you can access this interface and you can do this and this and this. That's not how things are supposed to work, because that will fail eventually, and we've seen that
Yes.
over and over again. Similar thing, I don't recommend companies to disclose their security practices just like that. You don't have to go telling everyone. You can if you want to, but you shouldn't necessarily make it all open. You shouldn't
Okay.
be transparent about that, but you should be transparent to your customers about what matters for them. You don't have to tell them like, this server is running there and that's how we protect it. No, but you have to assure customers and users that you are taking security seriously. And for some things, you'll find companies being very open, like how they handle passwords, because there's a very good standardized way of getting that right. So if as a company you can come out and say like, hey, we actually follow this best practice, then that gives some some assurances to customers or users that are worried about that. But it's always obscurity can be a very good mechanism to make it harder for attackers to succeed, but it should never be a defense mechanism, because eventually somebody will have the details, whether it's an ex-employee or God knows who, somebody will find out those details, and even then your application should remain secure.
And I guess like obscurity wouldn't work like in the workplace, because eventually people will find out and they're going to be more not happy when they found out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like the parallel. You can grab a lot of information like from security. That also applies like to the work environment in general, which is really interesting.
One moment when transparency is actually pretty important is when things go wrong. So whenever a breach happens, that's not the moment to start hiding details and downplaying the problem. That's the moment to own up to it and basically inform your users, like, something bad happened. This is exactly what happened. This is what got impacted, and this is what we'll do to ensure it doesn't happen again. And we will help you handle the fallout if there is fallout, and so on and so on. So that's when a breach happens. That's usually when companies like clamp down and try to give as little information as possible, but that's probably not the right way, because people will react badly to that. So that's a moment where transparency definitely pays off.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When the everything goes to hell, that's when you need to be transparent. If everybody's happy, they could live with a little less transparency because everything is good. But when stuff is getting worse and worse and worse, then you need to like put everything on the table and say, how this is where we are. How do we move forward? How do we solve it? What can we do? It's not the moment to hide stuff, because people cannot work on problems when they can see just half of it or just a small part of it, and they cannot make like a really good decisions based on that, on just glimmers of the whole situation. And now I am really curious, Philippe. What is the book that had the most profound impact on you?
That's a very good question. I would say that the book is Can't Hurt Me. That's the title. It's by David Goggins, and it's actually pretty interesting. So it's
what is it about? What's the main?
It's basically his life story. And David Goggins is like this super athlete. He's running like ultra marathons and doing all of these crazy things.
Okay.
That most people would say is impossible, but he still does it anyway. But the book is about how he got there and how he had a very difficult childhood, a very rough life, and then eventually had to rely on himself to turn things around and dig deeper and deeper into finding a way to achieve his goals. And he went on to join the army and became a Navy SEAL and so on and so on. And I think it's a very good book. It's something you should probably read a few times to get everything out there, because the first time you're going to read the story and be like, holy crap, this is insane. And then if you read it a second time, I noticed that you start finding other pieces in there. Like he had moments that he failed. He looked for excuses to bail out and not do something. And then you can start reflecting on those. And I think it's a very powerful book to learn about recognizing your limits, but also pushing past them and achieving more than you would ever thought was possible.
And how did the book impact you?
It showed me that you actually can push harder, and it showed me that not everything should work from the first time, and you actually, it's often very difficult because you start something and it doesn't work out the way you intend to, and it's very easy to abandon and think like, let's do something else or just forget about it. But you probably should go back to that and analyze, like, why did it go wrong, and maybe try again or change the direction a bit and approach it differently or something like that. And it's that process of seeing that even very accomplished people have that process of failing and going back and seeing what they should try differently, or just pushing through and fighting harder to get there. And it definitely helps me in achieving more, especially in these current times, because at home we have a newborn in the house and 2 kids that are not going to school. So as you can imagine, it's that takes a lot of time, and it's combining that with work and other things is definitely challenging sometimes.
Yes, well, it's also I believe it's a challenging pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. If everything works out, but there's good days and bad days as well, and you'll have to find a way to deal with that anyway. So
yes, and Can't Hurt Me sounds like a really awesome book, and the message it has, it's really powerful, and it's true. Most people, or at least I, don't succeed from the first try. So not generalizing it. It usually takes a couple of tries and reshaping the plan and working it and saying, okay, this direction doesn't work, let's try this one. Oh, this one doesn't work out also. So it's not smooth. When you tell the story about your success, it's always smooth because you have the tendency to leave off all the rough parts because you don't want to relive them for one, and you don't feel like they're so exciting for the other person listening.
Yeah, but you actually need that to tell a full story, and I think the book does a great job in telling that story. And yeah,
sounds awesome.
It's a good read, so definitely go for it.
Yeah, I am going to go for it. And Philippe, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find on the internet, so I'm on Twitter, and I have my website called pragmaticwebsecurity.com, and all the info is there basically. My website has a lot of free resources on security, so if you're a developer or someone in IT, it's definitely going to be useful to take a look at that. And yeah, I also have an online course that I'm building, so that is definitely going to be interesting if you want to learn about OAuth and OpenID Connect. So yeah, there's a lot of information for me online, and you'll definitely find me.
And I'm going to put the links in the show notes so people can find you even more easily.
Perfect.
And I highly recommend people, if they're working in a company that's becoming more security conscious, reach out to Philippe, see if you can work something out and get some training or however you can work together. Because Philippe, after the discussion, I can tell you he's really passionate about security. And you need
Absolutely.
passion. You need somebody with passion about it.
And even if you don't work in a company, just start following a couple of my conference talks that are online, and you can start learning about security and take it from there.
That's awesome, Philippe. Thank you for coming on the show. It's been
my pleasure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.